Hello friends, welcome back to another episode of Movies and Melodies. It's the last episode for this year and it's about a very famous artist. I'm not going to tell you right away who the artist is. I think you all can guess who it is in probably just a few minutes. August 1st, 1933 saw the birth of a second girl child in the house of Iqbal Begum and Ali Baksh Sahib. Ali Baksh Sahib was a musician and he played, for small films and mainly small theatre companies. Iqbal Begum was actually a dancer. He met her when he was playing for one of these studios in Bombay. She was actually named Prabhavati. She was a Bengali Christian at that point. She was also the grandniece of Pandit Rabindranath Tagore. She met Ali Baksh Sahib and they both fell in love. She was a very beautiful woman. They got married. She converted to Islam, of course. Ali Baksh Sahib was from Pakistan. There he had a wife already and 3 daughters. He actually was doing quite well over there. He was called Master Ali Baksh, and he for some reason was not happy in Pakistan, I guess, and he decided to try his luck in Bombay. Of course, at that time it was not really Pakistan, it was still British India. So he came to Mumbai. It was difficult for him. He played for many small theatrical companies and he met his second wife, married her. They had a first daughter, Khurshid. She became a child artist and she was doing quite well. Then the second baby was born, Mahajabeen. Ali Baksh Sahib was very, very unhappy when this child was born. For him, it was the 5th daughter. However, he soon, reconciled himself to the fact. And the other thing was that the child was very, very beautiful. She was named Mahajabeen for a reason. It means one who has a face that is as beautiful as the moon. She was called Munna at home. Mahajabeen is too much of a mouthful for a small child. Munna was not given much love and affection in her family. Khurshid was the favored child because she was already an earning member. The chawl that they lived in was little better than a slum. It was right across from Roop Tara Studios. That was the only distinguishing point that it had. But sadly, Roop Tara Studios was one of the lowest among the studios, so not very great movies were made there. However, this young child, despite the atmosphere that she was being brought up in and, circumstances of considerable poverty, she was a happy child, very intelligent, very bright, very curious. She was very interested in reading and books. Her parents had other plans for her, however. Ali Baksh Sahib fell sick, so the whole family moved back to Punjab, came back after about a year. But again, they found it very difficult to make a living because at this point, Iqbal Begum fell sick. She had some lung issues and she was unable to dance. The family now depended on Khurshid's earnings as a child artist. Ali Baksh Sahib was not getting much money as a musician, and the occasions where they employed him were few and far between. So money was really, really tight. And this young baby, Munna, was only 4 years old when her father decided to go around to all the studios trying to hawk her as a child artist. He took her to Vijay Bhatt, who was making Leatherface at the time, became a big hit actually. He needed a child artist. He saw this child and he was very impressed by how talented she was even at that young age. He hired her, paid her 25 rupees per day to come in, which was a princely sum for them. And her career as a child artist started at that point. They renamed her baby Meena, and as an adult, she became Meena Kumari. She acted in a lot of movies as a child artist, majority of them with Vijay Bhatt. When she was 14, she was considered too old to be a child artist. So she was cast actually as a lead heroine opposite Agha, the famous comedian, in a movie called Bachon Ka Khel. Movie flopped badly. No one took any notice of her. In the meanwhile, her mother begged the great Kedar Sharma to, take her daughter under his wing and groom her. So he did. He took her, had her in this movie, cast her in this movie. And the movie, I think, was completed. Unfortunately, it never got to be released because a fire destroyed all the prints of the movie. So now this poor girl, she's somehow making a living playing side roles and such, but she finally got roles where she played all the Hindu goddesses in a whole bunch of mythological movies. And oddly enough, she was incredibly popular in the whole country. These movies were huge hits. She actually was paid very well. Homi Wadia, who made these movies actually, really loved her, and he took very good care of her. He paid her incredibly well. This enabled the whole family to move to a much better home, and they were able to buy a car. In fact, Meena ji loved to drive herself. She learned how to drive, and she used to drive around all over the place in her car. So circumstances were fantastic, and things were looking up when she was given roles to act in two very important movies. One was Baiju Bawra and the other was Footpath. In 1950, she turned 18 and she met the love of her life, Kamal Amrohi. She had met him briefly when she was a very young child. He was looking for a child artist for Sohrab Modi and, met her at that time. Obviously, she didn't really remember, but when she met him when she was 18, she was completely bowled over by this handsome young man who was very intelligent, just like her, very artistic and creative, and a writer. She too was a writer. She wrote poetry, and her pen name for poetry was Naz. She wrote some very beautiful shares, of course very sad, but still very beautiful. So when she met this man, despite the fact that he was already married, she fell madly in love with him. And the funny thing was, he had barely noticed her because they were introduced by Ashok Kumar when she was shooting for a movie with Ashok Kumar called Tamasha. And he sort of, was more or less civil, said hello, and then talked to Ashok Kumar and went on. A couple of years later, he was making this movie called Anarkali, and he had cast Madhubala. They had a fight, and Madhubala quit the movie. He was desperate for a heroine. The producer was, really upset, needed things to happen because he was losing money. So they approached Meena Kumari to act in the movie as Anarkali. Her father, realizing that the producer was pretty desperate, managed to negotiate a really fat fee, 15,000 rupees for the movie, and Meena ji was cast in the movie. They even started shooting. In the meanwhile, she fell sick with typhoid, and she was sent to Mahabaleshwar to recover. On the way back, she met with an incredibly serious car accident. She was injured very badly. She also lost a couple of fingers from her left hand. And she was in hospital in Pune, very depressed, because she thought this was the end of her career and that she would be thrown out of Anarkali now because, shooting has stopped. Luckily for her, fate had a different plan. Kamal Amrohi was in Delhi at the time when she had the accident. He immediately came down and he came to see her. She was ecstatic that this man whom she idolized had come all the way to talk to her to make sure she was okay. He reassured her that he was not going to throw her out of the movie. He was going to keep her on. They were going to continue with the shooting and everything once she recovered. This was the impetus she needed. She got better very quickly. They continued to film. And she also went back to filming Baiju Bawra and Footpath. In the meanwhile, the love affair between these two really got very intense. You know, Kamal Amrohi, when she was in hospital, used to come every day from Bombay. He'd drive all the way to Pune. They actually wrote letters to each other. They would sit in the hospital reading each other's letters, not even really talking. But that for them was the height of their expressions of love. Now, Kamal Amrohi had been widowed once. He had married this lady, Bilkis Bano, and she had passed away. Then he married Begum Saida, 3 children by her, 2 sons and a daughter, Rukhsar. He was with them when he met Meena ji, and he was actually a Sayyid, which is one of the highest levels of Shia Muslims. And for him to marry a Sunni Muslim and one who comes from films, you know, it was considered not very respectable. So people were not sure whether he would actually propose marriage. But to his credit, he really loved Meena ji. He did want to marry her. Ali Baksh Sahib was dead against this whole thing. He really did not want the two to marry because he thought if she married this man, then she would stop working and he would lose his golden goose. So the two of them got married in secret on Valentine's Day 1952. In both a Sunni ceremony and a Shia ceremony, her sister was with her. She went back home. The relationship and the marriage was kept secret. But this is Bollywood. You can't keep secrets for long. Her father found out, was furious. He was pressuring her to divorce Amrohi Saab, but she was adamant she didn't. She also continued with her work. She was shooting for these films. Baiju Bawra was released in October of that movie and was a massive hit. It, you know, people were shocked at how popular the movie became. Music, of course, was phenomenal. Naushad and Shakil Badayuni, Rafi Saab, Lata Mangeshkar singing songs in the movie. You had Amir Khan, you had Paluskar Saab, all kinds of people singing in this movie. Oh my goodness, it was a success on all different levels. Bharat Bhushan as the hero became another huge hit. So this movie really catapulted her into becoming an A-lister. In the meanwhile, the producer of Anarkali lost all his money in the stock exchange, became bankrupt, so the movie was shelved. For my first song, I want to share this lovely duet, Rafi Saab Lata ji singing from Baiju Bawra, Jhoole Mein Pavan Ke.
झूले में पवन के आई बहार नैनों में नया रंग लाई बहार प्यार छलके हो प्यार छलके हो डोले मन मोरा सजना डोले मन मोरा हो जी हो डोले मन मोरा सजना चुनरिया बार बार ढलके झूले में पवन के आई बहार प्यार छलके हो प्यार छलके ओ मेरी तान से ऊंचा तेरा झूलना गोरी मेरी तान से ऊंचा तेरा झूलना गोरी मेरे झूलने के संग तेरे प्यार की डोरी मेरे झूलने के संग तेरे प्यार की डोरी तू है जीवन सिंगार प्यार चल के झूले में पवन के आई बहार प्यार चल के हो प्यार चल के.
After Baiju Bawra's success, Meena ji was very, very busy. She continued to act in a lot of films. They were still living separately. She and Kamal Amrohi continued to live with her father. Her father was very relieved that his daughter was not, going to abandon him. The actual plan was, Kamal Amrohi really did not like her to continue acting after she married him. He wanted her to be at home with him. The plan they had was that she will earn around 2 lakhs, save up this money, hand that over to her father so that he becomes financially secure, and she quits films after that. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Kamal Amrohi Saab, after Baiju Bawra, and the fact that Anarkali was shelved, decided to make this other movie called Daira. Meena ji loved the idea, and he was going to cast her in it as the lead. They made Daira. That also was, there's a lot of, conflict around this whole thing. Because when she came home and told her father she wanted to start shooting for Daira, he threw a fit because he had already committed her time to Mehboob Khan for Amar. And he was like, this is opposite Dilip Kumar, who's, one of the biggest heroes at that time. Meena ji was very upset, but she decided not to have too much of a fight with her father. She went for about 4 days to shoot for Amar. On the 5th day, she created some kind of an argument and walked off the sets, promptly drove herself to Bombay Talkies, started shooting for Daira. That evening when she drove home, her father refused to let her into the house. So she decided, with her sister's help, to move into Kamal Amrohi's house. So she took all her clothes and whatever she could, and she went to live with her husband. Of course, Kamal Saab was very, very happy about this whole thing. Her father begged and pleaded the next day, asked her to come back. But at this point, she refused because she was also happy being back, living with her husband. Daira was completed. It basically sank without a trace once it was released. Sadly, actually, because it was a good movie, her acting was noticed and she was commended very, very highly for the job that she did in Daira. It was a very progressive kind of a movie. It talked about this young girl who is married off to a very old, mortally ill man, and how this young girl has all these sexual desires that unfortunately are repressed, and issues that ensue from that. So anyway, the movie just died, but Meena Kumari was still a huge success. She continued to act in a lot of movies. By the way, she was remarkable in how efficiently she managed her time. This was due to the fact that Kamal Saab and his secretary, Bakar Ali, they both managed her calendar. They did a very, very good job, managing to pick really good movies and allot dates in such a way that she was working efficiently and comfortably for all these different movies. She acted with all the top heroes of the time. And in 1955, one of the very, 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 very few light-hearted comedy movies of Meena Kumari came out, Azad. Dilip Kumar and Meena Kumari were in the leads. And this was also the first comic movie for Dilip Kumar. Both of them are so good in the movie. It was a South production, and they shot, in Chennai and Coimbatore and other locations in the South. Both of them did a phenomenal job. The movie was a huge hit. She actually was really very, very good in comic roles. She had great comedy, instincts and timing. Sadly, The fans only saw her as a tragedy queen, and that kind of became her life too. So for my next song, I'm sharing a duet from Azad, C. Ramchandra's music and Rajendra Krishan's lyrics. It's a very sweet duet sung by C. Ramchandra himself and Lata ji. Kitna hasi hai mausam.
कितना हसी है मौसम, कितना हसी सफर है, साथी है खूबसूरत ये मौसम को भी खबर है। कितना हसी है मौसम, कितना हसी सफर है, साथी है खूबसूरत ये मौसम को भी खबर है। मिलती नहीं है मंजिल, राही जो हो अकेला, दो हो तो फिर जहाँ भी चाहे लगा लो मेला। दिल मिल गए तो फिर क्या, जंगल भी एक घर है, साथी है खूबसूरत ये मौसम को भी खबर है। कितना हसी है मौसम, कितना हसी सफर है, साथी है खूबसूरत ये मौसम को भी खबर है।
As I mentioned before, when they filmed Azad, it was all done in the south, and Kamal Amrohi accompanied Meena ji when they went there. It was a very kind of an idyllic time for the two of them. They spent a lot of time, walking on the beach and having these long, deep conversations. It was at that time that they came up with the idea of Pakiza, and both of them were very excited about, going back from the shooting and starting filming on that movie. Ashok Kumar was picked as the hero, and everything was, set to go. Even though this was sort of an idyllic kind of a time, in the marriage itself, there was a lot of friction. One of the biggest reasons was the fact that she was continuing to work. Even though she had said that she was going to stop working once, her family was well settled, that didn't happen. Meena ji realized that working, acting, was very satisfying for her. It gave her purpose. She was a very creative person, an incredibly intelligent woman, very, very good at emoting, and she loved doing all these different roles. So for her, it was very hard to give up her career. And moreover, she was so successful at it too. She was doing really, really well. Kamal Amrohi Saab started insisting that she give up her career. The fights got pretty intense. Finally, it got to the point where Meena ji threatened to divorce him. He got a little alarmed because he did love her, and he backed off and said, okay, you can continue working, but I have these conditions. One was that she comes home every evening by about 6:30 and spends the evening with him. Two was that she doesn't have any male actor coming into her dressing room at work in the studios when she was alone. And the third was that she only go in her car to the studio and come back in her car, not drive with anyone else. She agreed to these conditions because she felt like, anything for peace. But the problem is, these are conditions that are very hard to, I guess, keep to, especially in a profession like films. There are discussions that happen, people walk in and out of your makeup room. You can't sit around saying, no males coming in here unless I have a chaperone type thing. Or, somebody asks her, like Pradeep Kumar asked her to come and drive in his new car. And since she loved cars, she did that. And that got reported to Kamal Saab. So that was another big fight. So these things just kept accumulating. they were somehow, carrying on in this atmosphere of kind of lack of trust and this feeling of, what do I say, where she was feeling like very oppressed and he felt that his wife didn't love him anymore. She continued to act, of course, with all of these amazing actors and everything, producing hit after hit. Even though a few of her movies did flop, it didn't make any difference to her popularity and the fact that everybody wanted her to act in their movies. 1960 saw the release of two of her really popular movies, Dil Apna aur Preet Parai, where she co-starred Rajkumar. Nadira was in a very strong parallel role. Music was phenomenal, Shankar Jaikishan. That was a huge hit. It was very sort of a Milson Booney romance kind of movie. The second one was her second comedy of her entire career, again with Dilip Kumar, Kohinoor. That movie was a laugh fest from the word go. Jeevan Kumar was the villain. Mukri was the comic side of the whole thing. Such an awesome movie. Great, great fun. I would highly recommend it. Music was Naushad Saab with Shakil Badayuni's lyrics. So for my next song, I'm sharing a duet, Rafi Saab, Lata ji. कोई प्यार की देखे जादूगरी गुलफाम को मिल गई सब्ज परी.
कोई प्यार की देखे जादूगरी गुलफाम को मिल गई सब्ज परी. कोई प्यार की देखे जादूगरी गुलफाम को मिल गई सब्ज परी. सपना है अब सारा जमाना अपना है. नैनों में नया एक सपना है अब सारा जमाना अपना है. दुनिया है हमारी प्यार भरी, दुनिया है हमारी प्यार भरी. कोई प्यार की देखे जादूगरी गुलफाम को मिल गई सब्ज परी.
Sahib Baby or Ghulam. This was Guru Dutt's passion project. Once he came across this story, it was Bimal Mitra's story, Sahib Baby Ghulam, and it was both theatrically adapted in Bengali as well as been made into a movie in Bengali. Guru Dutt really wanted to make this movie in Hindi. He looked first for somebody to play the role of Bhutnath. Tried a whole bunch of people, did screen tests. He sort of settled on Biswajit. But in the end, it just didn't work and he ended up playing the role himself. Then opposite him, in the role of the very young and impetuous Jabba, he cast Wahida ji. And the incredibly and hugely important role of Choti Bahu, he wanted to give to Meena Kumari. Actually, Wahida ji wanted this role, but he told her that she was not, one, mature enough to act in this role, and that he just didn't see her having, at that point in her career, having the depth to be able to play this incredibly complex role. Meena Kumari was, at that point, nobody was actually approaching her directly. Because Bakar Ali and Kamal Amrohi were managing her calendar, they would all go to them. Guru Dutt went to Kamal Amrohi. He said there were no dates available at all for years. So, sorry, she can't do it. he actually did not like that role because there is an element of, wantonness to the BV. She's so desperate for her husband's love that she decides, she'll start drinking to find some kind of compatibility with him. She will, dance or sing as wantonly as the courtesans that he used to see every day. So Kamal Amrohi did not like the role, so he just didn't want her doing this role. So he came up with this whole thing of no dates, so sorry. So Guru Dutt, of course, went on to look for other people. He did, again, various screen tests. Jitendra Arya, the photographer, his wife, Chaya, they both moved from London, actually, to, see if they could act in this, and she could act in this and all of that. But Guru Dutt was just not happy. He, was desperate, and he told Abrar Alvi, who was his very, very good friend, his writer, his right-hand man even. And Abrar actually was going to debut as director with this movie. So he told him, you have to go and convince Meena ji. Abrar Alvi managed to find some alone time with Meena Kumari. So what he did was, he had recorded the dialogues of all the characters in his own voice, the way he visualized them playing it. He had her listen to the whole thing. She was crazy about the idea of playing Choti Bahu. It was no doubt a tragic role, but it was not that of a woman who was, weak, helpless and weepy. This was a woman who was going to take charge of her life no matter where it led her. It was that kind of a role. Very, very different for Meena Kumari, took her away from her virginal white image and cast her in these shades of grey. Her only condition for the movie was she wanted to shoot it in one 45-day chunk. And she was not able to give him dates right away, so I think he had to wait almost a year for it. And Kamal Amrohi, in the meanwhile, decided he was going to make it as hard for Guru Dutt as possible. He asked for a 25% increase in her going rate at the time. Guru Dutt was, he was like, I don't care, I'll pay the money and I'll wait for her. So while he was waiting for her dates, he shot the rest of the movie where she was not needed. All the scenes with everyone else was done, even went into editing. Then he got her to come in and play her stuff. Then the whole movie was edited and everything, and it was released. Huge, huge hit on so many levels, right? The movie was absolutely excellent. It was sent in as India's entry at the Berlin Film Festival. It won a lot of awards and such. It was also sent to the Oscars, but it ended up not getting into the nominations. But the movie, the cinematography, first thing, Murthy ji, absolutely brilliant. I mean, the shots, the lighting, you can see Guru Dutt's hand behind all of this. Even though Abrar Alvi did direct the movie, you can see how much of an input Guru Dutt himself had in the movie. Just by looking at how Choti Bahu appears in the movie, Meena Kumari is absolutely luminous. She has never looked better in any movie of hers, honestly. And then the direction, of course, was fantastic. Acting was superb. The movie, the way the whole story unfolds, the editing, all of it is absolutely top-notch. And the music, of course, phenomenal. It was Hemant Kumar and Shakil Badayuni wrote the lyrics for the songs for this movie. Geeta Dutt sang all the songs that were picturized on Choti Bahu. Asha ji sang for Wahida ji. This song that I want to share is a solo. It's where Choti Bahu is, the earlier days of their marriage. She is waiting, she's getting ready and, beautifying herself for her husband to come. And, they're going to have their little romantic, intimate moment. And so she's very excited about this. And, this Meena Kumari portrays that very beautifully in the song, the excitement, the anticipation, the thrill of going to see her husband and how he reacts when he sees how beautiful she is looking and so on. Geeta Dutt has sung very, very, very well for this particular song. Piya Aisa Jiya Mein Samaye Gayo Re.
पिया ऐसो जिया में समाए गयो रे कि मैं तन मन की सुध बुध गवा बैठी पिया ऐसो जिया में समाए गयो रे कि मैं तन मन की सुध बुध गवा बैठी हर आहट पे समझ आए गयो रे हर आहट पे समझ आए गयो रे झट घूंघट में मुखड़ा छुपा बैठी पिया ऐसो जिया में समाए गयो रे
After Sahib Bibi Aur Ghulam, she remained steeped in the role of Choti Bahu. She just could not get herself out of it. Her home situation also was to blame for this. Fights were very, very common in the house. Another reason was that as Meena Kumari's career was kind of hitting its peak at this point, Kamal Amrohi was in a downward spiral with his job. People weren't, calling him to direct movies. He was not paid as much attention. So huge ego clashes were happening at home. And he would take offense at all kinds of imagined insults and, would storm off and come back and then rage and rant and rave at her. She, on the other hand, came from a background where even as a child she wasn't given love and affection. There were no demonstrations of any kind of loving behavior from her parents. So she always craved love. She always craved, huge expressions and demonstrations of affection, which she was definitely not getting from Kamal Amrohi because he was in his own kind of misery, feeling that, she was not understanding him. They did have moments of great connection also, but few and far between. Both of them were not quite understanding each other. They did love each other very deeply. They both knew at a very deep level that they would not find anyone else who was quite their equal. Basically, they were soulmates, if you want to say that. Unfortunately, they couldn't overcome all of these irritations and these little factors that were adding to this whole mess. There were people around them also, both sides, who were interfering in this whole mess and making things worse. 1963, I think, she was shooting Pinjre Ki Panchi. Gulzar Saab was assistant director for this movie. She and he were very, very good friends because she met him when she was filming Bimal Roy's movies, and she got along beautifully with him because he was also a poet. They had very, very similar interests. They were both intellectuals. He appreciated her poetry greatly and was a huge admirer of hers. So when she came on the sets that day, she was in a bad mood. She had already started drinking a lot because she was having issues sleeping. So the doctor had prescribed a small amount of brandy every night. Unfortunately, this small amount ended up becoming larger and larger amounts. She fell into a very typical alcoholic behavior where she was hiding alcohol in different containers and drinking this. So she woke up, probably hungover, came over to the sets, was already in a bad mood. She saw that Bakar Ali was on the sets. He was sort of playing like a watchdog at that point. And as she walked in, she asked Gulzar Saab to accompany her to her makeup room and she was going to get her makeup done. Bakar Ali, playing the watchdog, was not going to allow this to happen. So he prevented Gulzar Saab from entering her room. She got very upset. She started yelling at Bakar Ali, who turned around and slapped her. That was pretty much the last straw. She told him to let Kamal Amrohi know that she was not returning home that day, and that was it between the two of them. She went on to finish her shooting, and she did not go home. She went to her sister's house, Madhu's house. Madhu was married at this point to the great comedian Mahmood. And both of them welcomed Meena ji into their house, and she continued to live with them. Kamal Amrohi actually came that night to apologize and to beg her to come back home. But she was so angry and upset at the fact that Bakar Ali had slapped her in front of everyone. She just could not get over that one fact. Things were too raw, I guess. He should have waited maybe to apologize to her. I don't know. At any rate, she didn't come out. He was very angry and upset at that point. His ego was hurt too. So they separated. And they never divorced though, just separated. She continued to act, and at this point in her life, Dharmendra came into it. She acted with him in Purnima. This incredibly handsome young man who was also a huge fan of hers. It was almost like balm to her wounds, a man who worshipped her pretty much and gave her all the kind of loving assurances that she wanted from Kamal Saab, but she couldn't get. And for him, it was this amazing, great actor who he idolized also. And he was so grateful for her mentorship and her affection. So it was sort of a mutual thing between the two of them. Obviously not going to go anywhere. He was married, she was married, and she really loved Kamal Amrohi. This was more of a distraction for her. And unfortunately for her, Dharmendra was also her drinking buddy. He encouraged her to drink. But then he realized very quickly that she was at a very dangerous point in her life. He tried to now stop her from drinking, but that was not happening. The two of them broke up. She got sicker and sicker. She had very severe liver cirrhosis. She went abroad to the UK to get treated for this. Her secretary at the time went with her, took care of her. They couldn't do much because the cirrhosis was very advanced at that point. They just told her, we can put you on medication, but you have to stop all alcohol and you have to rest more. You can't work these crazy hours. She came back, continued to work pretty hard. Her career also was going down because with the cirrhosis, she started accumulating a lot of fluid in her body. So she always looked kind of bloated, didn't look as young and attractive. And there were a whole slew of very talented, young, pretty leading ladies who were, taking over basically. So her career also was on a downward spiral. Towards late 60s was when Kamal Amrohi came back to her, asking her to work with him to complete Pakiza. This movie took forever to be completed. Started in 1958. Still wasn't completed. They started shooting in black and white. Then color was introduced. So they reshot the movie in color. Then CinemaScope came in. They reshot everything again in CinemaScope. And then, of course, the two of them had their fight and separated. Everything stopped at that point. Now, when they wanted to, renew this whole thing, Ashok Kumar was too old to play the hero. So he ended up playing her father. Raj Kumar was roped in to play the hero. Padma Khanna was brought in as a body double. They used body doubles wherever they could because she was very sick at that point. She was very weak. Somehow, it became also, I think, a point of maybe pride for her to finish this movie. They did complete the movie, hugely over budget, and finally, February of, I think, 1972, it was released. The movie was a flop. It just did not run. People didn't like it. Nobody wanted to go see it. Meena Kumari was very disappointed, as was Kamal Amrohi. And she became really, really sick at that point. Her health just went into a very sharp decline at this point. And about a month after the release, March 31st, she passed away. And after she died, she left nothing to Kamal Saab. Not that he wanted the money. For him, what would have been more meaningful was for her to leave all her writing. And unfortunately, she left all of these to Gulzar Saab, who very painstakingly compiled them and published them. All her poetry he published, and her essays, whatever she had written. This was a very sore point with Kamal Amrohi, by the way. So, anyway, Khayyam Saab actually put a lot of her poetry into music. He actually had her sing this when she was alive. And there's a recorded album somewhere. YouTube also has some of those, but apparently it's available somewhere for purchase. I couldn't find it, but if you guys have better luck, you can go and try. It's just very tragic to think that an actor who was as talented, as creative, as intelligent and sensitive as her allowed herself to succumb to this feeling of never being loved and this feeling of feeling that nobody wanted her and that she would always be alone. That's it for today, folks. But before I go, I leave you with a happy song. This was again one of those rare movies in her career. Miss Mary, 1957. Oh, such a phenomenally good movie. It was a combination of two Bengali novels. Prasad from the south, he made this movie. It was made in Telugu and in Tamil as Missi Amma, starring the great Savitri in it. And he wanted to make a Hindi version, so he cast her. He kept the hero, Gemini Ganeshan, from the south for this movie also. And Kishore Kumar has a role in it as well. Oh, he's hilarious. The whole movie was so entertaining, so much of fun. It was just awesome. And the music was Hemant Kumar's music and Shakil Badayuni's lyrics. So this duet is the song that I'm going to share with you now. O Raat Ke Musafir, Chanda Zara Bata De. I will be back in 2 weeks. Until then, a very happy new year to all of you. I hope the new year brings you happiness, health, prosperity, all the good things. But until I see you next time, remember, music is food for the soul. Keep listening.
रात के मुसाफिर चंदा जरा बता दे मेरा कसूर क्या है तू फैसला सुना दे ओ रात के मुसाफिर चंदा जरा बता दे मेरा कसूर क्या है तू फैसला सुना दे है भूल कोई दिल की आँखों की या खता है कुछ भी नहीं तो मुझसे फिर क्यों कोई खफा है भूल कोई दिल की आँखों की या खता है कुछ भी नहीं तो मुझसे फिर क्यों कोई खफा है फिर क्यों कोई खफा है मंजूर है वो मुझको जो कुछ भी तू सजा दे, मेरा कसूर क्या है तू फैसला सुना दे।
ओ रात के मुसाफिर